As you explore the wilderness, you come across the town of Convenient Resupply option, and you're going to have a couple of days of downtime. What would you like to do? Would you like to check the local maps and see if you can chart out some of the important landmarks, or maybe talk to the locals and gather rumors about what might be in the forest? Or you could spend some time crafting and upgrading your weapons and armor. What would you like to do? Okay, so you are hanging out at the bar and fleecing everyone for all of their coin, and you are doing alchemical experiments on the mead supply. And why do you need to know how many chickens you can find? And so, after a couple of days, yet again, you find yourselves banished from another town on the threat of pain of death. Our heroes, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we're going to talk about some tips for new storytellers in Pathfinder 2nd Edition on this episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello travelers and tourists, my name is Mark and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I am a storyteller who knows that all of the important game master skills naturally transfer from one game system to another. So yes, that does mean you can continue to completely rip off all of your favorite scenes from Lord of the Rings. They will work in this game. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder, and welcome to Tips for New Storytellers in Pathfinder 2e, episode number 1. So, recently there has been a shakeup in the TTRPG world, and a lot of people are trying out new games, and there are a lot of people who are trying out Pathfinder 2nd Edition for the first time. There are people who are playing the game for the first time, but there are also people who are storytelling the game for the first time, and I decided to add a new series to my channel where I offer some quick tips and suggestions to help new players and game masters get a good jump start on the game. Now, these videos are intended to be quick and digestible. They are not going to be deep dives into any particular part of the game. Though, if you are interested in a more in-depth look at the storytelling side of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you can check out my Storytelling in Pathfinder 2e series, which already has a pretty healthy collection of videos available, and I will have a link to that in the video description. But my goal is, every month, I would like to drop short videos, one for players, one for game masters, to help people who are new to the game orient themselves to some of the more nuanced aspects of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So I hope that these tips and tricks will help you get a good start to your new campaign in Pathfinder 2e. Before we dive into the tips in this video though, I do want to do the quick YouTube reminder. Please remember, if you enjoy this video, like, share, subscribe. You can check out my free Discord and my Patreon. Both of those are linked in the video description. And as always, the most important thing you can do is jump down to the comment section and be part of the conversation. Maybe you have some tips for new storytellers, or maybe you have particular questions you'd like me to cover in this series. Please jump down to the comments and let me know. I love to hear what you have to say. Alright, let's get started. My first tip is going to sound very familiar if you watched the players video, because it's the exact same tip that I started with in that video, and that is, it's okay to be new, and it's okay to make mistakes. Anytime you start something new, there is always a mixture of both anticipation and concern as you're trying to adapt to something you haven't done before. That's true with a new school, a new job, and even when you're trying a new game for the first time. And anytime that you start something new, you have a choice that you can make. You can work yourself into a state of worry that saps your joy, or you can look forward with anticipation and enjoy the process of discovering something that you haven't done before. In tabletop RPGs, I think there is this unhealthy drive towards system mastery that our communities tend to develop. We think, oh, if I'm playing a new game, I need to master the game as quickly as possible, and I'm not allowed to make any mistakes or I'm doing it wrong. And that's not true. Everyone who plays these games makes mistakes. Even professionals like the actors on Critical Role, I've seen them mess up game rules during some of their episodes, and guess what? It's okay. It doesn't ruin their game, and when it comes to games like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, it is okay to be new and to learn and to discover something that you haven't done before. Plenty of people have started playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition and made mistakes, and yet have gone on to have very successful games, and I know that to be true because I'm one of them. I've shared this story on this channel before. When Pathfinder 2nd Edition first dropped, I absolutely despised the rules for stealth in Pathfinder 2e. I thought they were horrible, I thought they were nonsensical, I couldn't understand why Paizo went the direction that they did with the stealth rules, and I thought I was just going to throw them out the window. And I kind of stayed in that state for several months until the channels No Nat Ones and How It's Played did some videos on stealth in Pathfinder 2e, and I realized I had completely misunderstood those rules. Since I didn't understand them, I was misinterpreting them and I was using them the wrong way, and it was hindering my gameplay. I made some pretty big errors and it set me back for a while, but I did eventually learn, and now I not only enjoy the stealth rules in Pathfinder 2e, but I've been able to use them successfully several times to make encounters a lot more interesting. As a new storyteller in Pathfinder 2e, you are going to make mistakes, but that's okay. Don't hold yourself to an impossible standard, give yourself some grace, and enjoy the process of learning. Now, an important thing to do when you are new to a game is to look for resources that can help you clear up those misunderstandings. Since you're already on YouTube, one of the things you can do is look into the different content creators here on YouTube who talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition, how to play the game, and how to be successful. A really good resource for storytellers is the channel How It's Played, because he does a lot of deep dives into the rules of Pathfinder 2e and gives you examples of exactly how they work. But there are also some fantastic lore channels like Sir Vertigo or Galarian in Depth, and that's just scratching the surface of all of the fantastic resources you can find here on YouTube. You can also check out the Pathfinder 2e Reddit. There are different Pathfinder 2e groups on Facebook, and I'm sure many other places on the internet as well, to say nothing of the many fantastic resources that Paizo has developed to make the job of storytelling so much easier. I actually have a video on the Game Master screens that Paizo gives for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, both the basic screen and the advanced screen, and if you know how to use those products, they make it very easy for you. And as a storyteller, I am not ashamed to say I get a ton of use out of the bestiary battle cards that Paizo produces. What I'm saying is, there are a lot of resources available, and even if you are new to the storyteller's chair, there are plenty of things that can help you get oriented and allow you to start telling some wonderful stories. The second tip that I want to give new storytellers for Pathfinder 2e will probably take you a little bit of time to get used to, but I just want to go ahead and prepare you for this mental process, and that is, the definition in Pathfinder 2e should serve your story rather than hinder your story. So one of the benefits and challenges of Pathfinder 2e is this is a very well-defined game. It is mechanically complex. Paizo has done a very good job of adding a lot of nuance to this system, and you can really dig deep with a lot of different options and rules in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and that's before you even dive into the variants that are offered in the Game Mastery Guide. There is a lot here. And in some ways that's beautiful, because if you have a question, there is probably an answer somewhere, but it can also be a narrative challenge because the definition of different things inside the game can sometimes break up the flow of storytelling. A good example of this is the 3 defined modes of play: encounter mode, exploration mode, and downtime mode. To be honest, it can throw off your storytelling a little bit if you say, okay, the fight is over, now we're going back to exploration mode, or we're ending exploration mode and going into downtime mode. You can break up the flow of your game if you're not careful, because the different parts of the game are so defined. And really the trick here is just getting used to the language of the game where instead of breaking up the flow of the game, it serves as a reminder and an aid to the pacing of the game. Your characters are involved in exploration and they stop at a city to resupply. A simple phrase like, "You have a couple of days of downtime, what would you like to do?" "Okay, give me some rolls." "Alright, back to the adventure." Using the language of the game well can actually aid the flow and feel of the game, but it can take a little bit of practice to get used to the different terminology that Paizo uses, and you want to practice the art of working that terminology in a way that it's going to feel natural to the game. It takes some learning to do, but when you learn how to do it well, it will flow and work wonders for you. A quick suggestion I can give you here: there are tons of fantastic game aids, especially throughout the Pathfinder 2e community, that can make different parts of the game flow very quickly. One of the things I've seen a lot of tables do is they will print out a cheat sheet of different exploration mode activities, and if players are in exploration mode, they can just sit their mini on top of that cheat sheet over whatever activity their character is doing, and then the player and the game master have a quick visual reference, and they don't have to eat up a ton of time asking what every player at the table is going to be doing. Paizo takes the time to break this game into a lot of distinct parts, and the utility is fantastic, but getting used to transitioning between different pieces of the game is something that you'll want to take the time to do as a storyteller. But now it's time to move on to tip number 3, and what is probably the most important question that every storyteller will ever have to answer: how do I make things up? Well, that's where you want to look at the simple DCs table, the DCs by level table, and the DC adjustments table that can be found in the core rulebook and in both the basic and advanced Game Master screen from Pathfinder 2nd Edition. These are tables that give you a quick snapshot of what different DCs in the game should be, and the reality is, as a storyteller, you can make up 97% of the stuff you need to make up in this game, and your players will never know the difference. Okay, let's talk about it real quick. First up is the simple DCs. This is a list of 5 DCs that serve as snapshots of the general levels of proficiency in the game: untrained, trained, expert, master, and legendary, or 10, 15, 20, 30, 40. Knowing those numbers can give you a quick and easy to implement target number for any action that your players might try to perform that you didn't prepare for, because, let's be honest, players love to come up with things you didn't prepare for. Are they doing something that any untrained person could probably succeed at? Then the DC should probably be around 10. Is this something that you would expect a master of a given craft to be able to perform? Then a DC closer to 30 is probably what you're aiming for. Paizo also offers a table of DCs that correspond to the level of a given creature, challenge, or item inside of the game, and oftentimes if your players want to do something that involves a particular target, you can just take whatever the level of that target is and then use that number as the baseline for the number that they need to roll. Recently in one of my games, my players were trying to track down a vampire that was hiding inside of a town, and when they started using some tactics that I hadn't prepared for, I just defaulted to the level of the creature to set the DC for whatever skills that they were using. It's very quick, it's very easy to drop in the game, and it will flow very naturally. Finally, Paizo does give you a DC adjustments, allowing you to modify the simple and level-based DCs based on whether something is common knowledge or rare, essentially allowing you to add a little more detail to the particular challenge that you've put before your players. I'm serious, as a storyteller, put these 3 tables in front of you, and almost anything your players throw your way, you're going to be able to quickly and easily come up with a target number that they need to beat in order to be successful. Now, I will say this, there is a little bit of a trap here that you want to be mindful of as a storyteller, and that is the DC by level table. The DC by level table is not about the level of your party. That is an easy trap to fall into. Oh, my players are level 4, I'm going to use the DC for a level 4 creature for everything that they're doing. Don't do that. That is the DC for a level 4 creature, and your players should not be interacting with just things that are at their level. If they are dealing with a level 2 hazard, you want to use the level 2 DC because that is a reflection of the hazard that they're facing. If they're going up against a boss monster that's level 5 or 6, you're going to want to use those higher DCs to represent the challenge in front of them. Don't just base the number that your players need to beat on the level of the party, but rather make sure you're using the level of the challenge, and as long as you're doing that, the number should be about where you want them to be to keep the game interesting, challenging, and engaging for your players. Next up, tip number 4 is going to be a tip that longtime viewers of this channel probably see coming, because this is one of those quotes that I have used a lot in discussing Pathfinder 2e. I want to talk about encounter building, and I want to talk about the fact that in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the word severe, get this, means severe. So in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, there are 5 general categories of challenge that an encounter can be: trivial, low, moderate, severe, and extreme. Now, if you have played other RPGs, you have probably seen similar encounter designs or similar encounter tables, and if you are taking the encounter tables that you've used in other games and try to apply them to Pathfinder 2e, you're going to get in trouble. In Pathfinder 1st Edition, they had a similar table, and the highest level challenge you could have was epic. And I remember running Pathfinder 1st Edition for a decade, and consistently, if I needed to throw a boss fight at my players, I threw them up against epic level encounters because my players could take it. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, in the very first sample game that I ran for my players, I threw them up against a low threat, moderate threat, and severe threat encounter, thinking that it would be a relative cakewalk for my players as they tried to learn the game. The low threat encounter was pretty easy. The moderate threat encounter was kind of tough, but my players made it through. And then in the severe threat encounter, one of my players almost died, and the other players were hurting really badly. It was kind of shocking to me because I didn't expect the severe threat encounter to be so brutal. In a word, I didn't expect severe to be so severe. That first session of Pathfinder 2e that I ran made me wake up to the fact that Paizo has tuned the numbers of the game such that the terminology means what it says it means. And I know that sounds a little silly, but if you're coming with the assumptions of other games and the sometimes wonky challenge rating that other games can have, this is a mistake that's easy to make. So when you are building encounters in Pathfinder 2e as a storyteller, make sure that you are studying that encounter building table well, make sure you understand it, and make sure that you are throwing the level of challenge at your players that you intend for them to face. Here's a quick cheat that I use a lot that can help you as a storyteller. Let's go for that nice middle-of-the-road moderate threat encounters. Encounters that players are supposed to win, but that are intended to provide a little bit of a challenge. How many on-level monsters should you throw at your party if you want to give them a moderate threat? Well, the answer is a number of monsters equal to 1/2 of the total number of players that are in your game. So, for example, if you have a party of 4 second-level characters and you want to throw them up against a moderate threat set of level 2 monsters, you should give them 2 level 2 monsters, not 4 like I would do in other systems. In fact, if you throw your players against an equal number of on-level creatures, that actually will count as an extreme threat encounter for your players. 4 level 2 party members, 4 level 2 monsters, that's actually a probable TPK. So remember this ratio: 1 on-level monster equals 2 PCs, and you should be right at that moderate threat that you want to throw at your players. Now, there are a lot of implications of what those numbers mean, but allow me to say this: as a storyteller, if you want to create scenarios where your players are going up against a large number of threats, you need to get in the habit of using lower level challenges and using those en masse rather than using on-level or higher level challenges, because those on-level and higher level challenges will overwhelm a party very quickly, especially if you use them en masse. And now on to tip number 5, and the final tip for this video. Speaking of encounter building, what should you do as a storyteller if you build an encounter for your players and you realize at the gaming table that the encounter is not going the way you intended for it to go, and the challenge for your players is just not what it's supposed to be. Well, I have good news for you. There are a couple of adjustments that Paizo gives us for creatures called the Weak and Elite adjustments, and you can find them in the bestiary for Pathfinder 2e. Now, the Weak and Elite monster adjustments are very easy to apply in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and honestly, you can do the math for these adjustments in your head at the gaming table, and your players will probably never be able to tell. And the amazing thing about it is, the Weak and Elite adjustments are a fantastic way to adjust the threat of an encounter up or down if, for some reason, the challenge that your players are facing doesn't correspond to what you intended for them to encounter. Practical example. You plan an encounter for your players and you realize that the monsters aren't hitting hard enough. The challenge is too easy. Your players are mopping the floor with the villains, and you intended for this encounter to be a little bit more of a threat to your players. What do? Well, easy solution. One of your villains spends an action, pops a potion, yells violently, and suddenly you're using a monster with the elite adjustments. That monster's probably going to start hitting where you wanted them to hit. Conversely, maybe you looked at an encounter and thought, this is something my players should be able to handle very easily, but when you get into the game, that monster is really knocking your players around and the fight is much harder than you intended it to be. Well, if you throw the weak template on one of the monsters in the encounter, suddenly that monster is going to be a lot easier to take down, and is probably going to be more on par with what you were aiming for when you designed the encounter. I have found the weak and elite adjustments to be very easy to apply inside of a game, and my players have never caught me doing it. Like, I kind of feel bad saying that on camera because they're probably going to be watching for it now. But in reality, it is one of the quickest and easiest ways to change an encounter on the fly if you need to tune up or down the level of threat to match what you were going for. Now, I will say this, if you want to use the weak or elite adjustments to adjust an encounter on the fly, I recommend doing it one creature at a time. A while back, I was running a Christmas-themed encounter where my players were fighting animatronic Christmas trees, and the fight was just a little bit tougher than I intended it to be. Well, I kept 3 of the evil Christmas trees the same, and I slapped the weak adjustment on one of the Christmas trees, and slapping the weak adjustment on that one Christmas tree was enough to bring the fight right back where I wanted it to be. So using the weak or elite adjustment on a single creature at a time allows you to pretty quickly and easily fine-tune a fight so it's landing where you want it to land, because it is so easy and can flow so naturally inside of the game. Seriously, weak and elite adjustments, they are a lifesaver for storytellers. And that is 5 quick tips for new storytellers in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I am hoping to do more videos in this series, but for now I'd like to turn the conversation over to you. Do you have any good tips for new storytellers in Pathfinder 2nd Edition? If so, jump down to the comment section and leave them there, and I may feature your tip in a future video. Like I mentioned before, if you are a new storyteller and you have particular questions that you would like me to cover, ask those as well, and I will try to get around to them. And if you want to dive a little more in depth, don't forget to check out my Storytelling in Pathfinder 2e series, because I do talk about a lot of these topics a lot more serious and a lot more completely, so you can get a better view overall of how they work. Don't forget all of the other YouTube stuff. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. You can check out my free Discord, my Patreon, all of that wonderful stuff. But as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.